Welcome to this presentation about the past, present, and potential future of commerce. We're going to do a deep dive into the structures behind all those evolving steps that got us to where we are today, things that we might call modern retail. Diving into the past, identifying the present, and also looking into the potential future, we're going to use the same kind of headlines or questions to be able to compare and see that evolving journey. We're going to start up with looking what kind of needs were there to be fulfilled? What functions did we actually have? What kind of offerings were there? Were there any specific attributes that were used? How was the supply done? Who were the seller? Who was the buyer? What was the basic request that really underpinned that need? And last but not least, what distinguished one thing from the other? At first, we were all gatherers, nomads, just trying to get by each day, one at a time, maybe helping out a little family or a friend or two, but more or less just trying to stay alive. So now we're going to try to apply this structured way of looking into things and see, were there even commerce when we were just gathering? Being a gatherer, the need was a necessity. I wanted something to eat, let's go out. The function, well, that was discovery. So I need to get out of my cave and get my limbs going to see if there was some kind of offering that could be found. The attributes, well, that was what nature would be kind enough to supply for us. And the supply, yep, one by one. I got an apple. Great, let's eat it. The seller, well, that might be me if I was the collector. The buyer, that could be my closest family, maybe a friend or two. The request was also from them really direct. We're hungry, give us something so we can survive the night. And the distinguishing part was, whatever I found, I took it. Next evolutionary step was when we realized that we could help nature on its way. We could grow food in the soil. That also had the positive side effect that we also could stay in one place instead of just wandering around. So evolving from gathering into growing came from the basic need of predictability, that we needed something that could be predictable and not just up to pure luck. The function we were after, that was that we could extract something from the earth. The offering, that was what we cultivated. And the attributes were models more or less to say, that we could do different stuff. The supply was stock, so that I could say, okay, I have a couple of bowls of potatoes. Anybody got carrots? So the seller were the farmer or the cultivator. The buyer was a friend. And the sort of like exchange factor for that was, okay, 2 potatoes, 1 carrot. The request was variation, because I could only grow as much as I can. But if I could exchange with somebody else, that gave me variation. And the distinguishing part, just as in the gathering part, was whatever did I grow. So the next step in the evolution was going from growing stuff in the soil into manufacturing. That was to supply us with products and things that we needed, but also it evolved in how we did commerce. Going into manufacturing was really processed by the need of reliability. We needed something that was much more predictable than what Mother Earth could supply us with. So the function was to start a factory and fabricate stuff so that it would be much more reliability in availability. The offering was made out of a staple, so instead of just making one by one on request, we did something in a warehouse. The attributes were standard, so for the first time in history, we can make standardized products, so I can say, I want one blue or a green or in that size or way. So this is really the birth of the modern retail, where we don't have a seller that is producing something. We have a seller that is an agent. And for the first time in history as well, we have a customer, somebody who is not my friend or family or close by neighbor. It could be anonymous persons just chipping in and seeing what's on the shelf for me. And the request was availability. Do you have that shirt that I want? Do you have that shovel that I really need? And the attributes or the distinguishing part was, what do you have in stock? Sum up the first half of this show. At first, we were just wandering around gathering stuff. Whatever we found, we took it. Then we evolved into staying in one place and then growing everything that we needed for survival. And then evolving into the final step, the manufacturing part, and the birth of modern retail. So these were the three first phases of commerce. So looking at this matrix, we could see really the evolution from these three phases or three evolutionary steps. And it's also interesting to see that this is also, from a commercial point of view, three different business logics. In the gathering part, we saw maybe a more like a giving economy. If I found 2 apples, I could give one of them to my friend. In the growing part, when we started doing more bigger things and we did things in stock, we started to see trading for the first time in history, where I had something that I could trade, I could exchange or barter with somebody else. We gathered because we didn't have a choice. It was a necessity to do so. We wanted a more predictable life. That's why we started to grow stuff, so that we could have that a little longer time frame to see that we could survive. And the next evolutionary step was really around the corner when we started manufacturing things, because we wanted reliability, not just up to what Mother Earth could give us, even if we grow it. We wanted something that we could build a sustained life from. So our evolution comes out of a basic need for a better life. Manufacturing didn't change business logic all by itself, but the introduction of the third-party middleman, the agent, did. Because they didn't do exchanges, they needed something else. So that was when money and cash really grow in popularity in society as a whole. And also, a second part of that was when the agent bought something from the fabric for, let's say, 1 and sold it to a customer for 150, we saw the birth of markups. And that's really the main business logic for most retailers, whether they're offline or online, as of today. The evolution of request follows the exact same path as the evolution of needs. So at first it was a direct request. I want my apple now. And then when we started to wanting more predictable stuff, we wanted variation. Nah, not an apple today, I want a carrot. And then when we started manufacturing, it became a question of availability. But the interesting part is that all along these three paths or three evolutionary steps, it's one thing that remains really stable. And that is the distinguishing part, whether I pick one or not, is what it is. What can I lay my hands on decides whether I take it or not. 3 evolutionary steps. 3 sort of like paradigm shifts from gathering to growing to manufacturing. Are we maybe at the end of that third evolution? Are we maybe looking a little around the corner towards a new revolution or evolution, as it always seems to be? But today's retailers need to ask themselves 2 fundamental questions. Question 1. In our modern society, what kind of needs do we as a retailer actually fulfill? We need to do some soul searching here. We need to really get down to the bottom of what needs are we really fulfilling. If we can see that, then we have a platform to look forward to maybe level ourselves to the next evolutionary phase. Question 2. What are the triggers that we can see today that will spur the next evolutionary step? Where are the signs? Could we see them already today? Maybe start visualizing them and see ourselves in that vision going onwards. That could be the platform for our next strategy meeting. Looking ahead, and not that far ahead actually, we see the provider really entering the scene. We see quite a few examples of this already. Traders or retailers transforming their offering from just selling goods into some kind of at-ease service, providing. The basic need a provider caters to is service. I can have access when I want to. I don't have to buy or own anything. The function, well, it's delivered to me when I want it. It's up upon my request. The offering, it's intangible. There's no goods traded at all. The attribute, well, it's customized. I could choose what kind of service or product I want. The supply is on demand. I decide when or where I want to have access. The seller-buyer relationship, it's more like a supplier and a client instead of a seller and a customer. The request, its simplicity is at ease, and the distinguishing factor is how the service is provided. The interesting part of being a provider is that it opens up for new business logics, not just selling goods or giving access to goods, but also supplying services on top of those products. We're going to take a look at an example, traditional actor who really managed to do that well. Clas Ohlson is a Swedish retailer, actually born as a mail order service with catalogs, but then maybe 20 years ago, turned into retail. And their stores, well, they look pretty much like this. Aisles and aisles, up and down, thousands of hardware categories, most categories you can imagine, both in store and online as well. But instead of just selling you that drilling machine, they have decided to, okay, what are you going to use it for? Well, I'm going to use it to put up my new fire extinguisher, which I need a drilling machine to do. But then they say, okay, we'll come and fix it for you. So they have, at a fixed price, people going on mopeds and cycles in dense areas that fix that for you. So you don't have to buy that drilling machine or do anything about it. They just come and fix it at a fixed cost. I think Clas Ohlson is a great example of somebody with a classic retail background and selling hardware products where the competition is really fierce. They added this service layer on top of it, so it makes it, for me, really easy to have them as a provider, not a go-to store, but a provider that mingles both the products and the services in one offering. So Clas Ohlson's new offering really is a service offering, delivering a function to me that is intangible by definition, but I feel like it's customized for me. It's on demand. I see them more like a supplier. I feel more like a client than a customer. And it's really simplicity at its core. And how they do it is at ease. So it's very easy for me to just book. Being a provider is first and foremost a mindset question. It's mostly about how you look upon yourself. Do you see yourself as a manufacturer or a retailer with a margin on the products you sell? Or do you see yourself as a provider providing services and products to a customer or client in need? So, as the example just showed, turning into a provider can also be a way of transforming a traditional business into a new business logic. In our modern society, access to products is no longer a problem. Availability is almost global, just about any category you can think of. So you might say that we have an abundance of them. So the problems with abundance is that you need some kind of guidance what to choose, and that is why you need a director. The director caters to the need of an experience, something beyond the basic products. The function should be more or less performed. The offering is the memory of that performance and the experience. The attribute is that it's personal for me. The supply, it's not just supplying stuff, it's how to reveal it. The seller is more like a creator of a context or something that means something specifically for me, which means that I am as a buyer is more like a guest. The request for this is guidance in that world of abundance, and the distinguishing factor between various directors is how they take on their mission. Stitch Fix is an online retailer for clothing, but they have taken a totally different approach to how they go about their business. So instead of me going in, clicking on some items and buying a new sweater, they direct me in a new direction to evolve my personal style. To start interacting with Stitch Fix, you fill in a large questionnaire, about 150 questions about your personal style, what you like, where you wear your clothing, what they are for. And based on that, they put together a box, about 5 items, and then send them to you on a regular basis. You try them out, the ones you keep, you pay for. The ones you don't want to keep, you send them back. And when you send them back, you also enclose a note saying, I didn't like this because they were the wrong size, or I don't like stripes, or I don't need any more shoes. And based on that information, the next fix you will get will be even more precise. Stitch Fix uses advanced technology to keep track of all the interactions and all the data that's personalized for you. And on top of that, they have a personal stylist. You can interact with a physical person to get your specific tips on how to wear and how to combine. And they also have the final touch before a package is sent to you. As part of their service, not just supplying clothing to you, they also supply the personalized tips on how to combine the clothing in this specific package with the ones that you already got. Stitch Fix has taken the luxury market's established model with personal styling and put that into a mass market experience, really catering to the many people's request of guidance. But not just guidance, also directions and help how to evolve my personal style, which really builds an enormous loyalty to the firm. Adapting the role of the director comes with great responsibility. Because when you say you're going to help people to choose or guide them, and also specifically directs them in a direction and maybe put them in a new context that they didn't know they wanted to be part of, that builds trust if you do that efficiently. And trust builds also loyalty. To ask for a transformation is something that lies really deep within us as human beings. A transformation is something that has a very distinctive before and after, something that is permanent. And to be able to supply services or actions that really emphasis on transformation comes with great responsibilities. But also, it opens up for new business logic based on value creation. Asking for transformation or help comes from the deep-lying need of permanent change. The function I'm looking for is someone to coach me there. The offering should be permanent. The attribute, well, it's co-created. It's both the transformer and me. The supply of that, well, it evolves over time. The seller I'm looking for is more like a facilitator of that change. I, as a buyer, I am a seeker for something new. And the request for that is that it should be a very permanent before and after. And the distinguishing factor of who am I going to choose to work with is why they do it. We're going to dive into a part of the business which is normally filled with packages and promises of a better life, health and nutrition. But we're going to take a look at a company that has taken a totally different approach to what their customer promise is, and that evolves into transformation. So Bulletproof Coffee started over a decade ago on the American East Coast as a chain of coffee shops with the notion of mixing York's butter into hot coffee. Davis Bray is the founder of Bulletproof Coffee, and he wrote a book back in 2011 called Superhuman, which is really the starting point for the biohacking movement, where he was to be the prophet. The essence of that book, and also the mission for Bulletproof Coffee, was that to have a long and really great life, you need to take control of your own biology and put yourself in the driver's seat. Don't let anybody else fool with that. So what Bulletproof Coffee as a company realized was that they couldn't just sell nutrition. They have to have a more holistic approach to be able to be that transformative coach for individuals. So they started biohacking conferences and made themselves the centerpiece of the biohacking community. And by doing so, they also elevated their own business logic into 5 or 6 different ones, where the nutrition and selling of products became a side business. Bulletproof is in itself a business that really has evolved. It has been co-created together with their customers and their partners. They were seekers themselves, and that's really what distinguishes them from other companies who have tried the same thing. They weren't after selling products to start with. That wasn't the idea. They were seeking for something else. They were seeking for a longevity in their own business. And that really what distinguishes them as of today. It's why they started the business at all. Bulletproof is in itself a business that really has evolved. It has been co-created together with their customers and their partners. They were seekers themselves, and that's really what distinguishes them from other companies who have tried the same thing. They weren't after of selling products to start with. That wasn't the idea. They were seeking for something else. They were seeking for a longevity in their own business. And that really what distinguishes them as of today. It's why they started the business at all. So all those companies who have a strive or ambition to be transformative coaches in some way, regardless of business they're in, they all are extremely mission driven. And everything they do serves all as a proof of that mission. And that mission is something that resonates with me seeking transformation for myself, and I can put my trust in their coaching hands. So 3 hypotheses about the evolution of commerce going onwards. They could either be viewed as 3 parallel tracks and you can choose 1 or 2 or maybe 3 out of them. Or you can view them as your own evolution onwards, maybe starting to see how could we provide some kind of service based on simplicity instead of just selling products. Could that maybe then evolve into direct experiences and to be a guide for people? And maybe even though it maybe today sounds far-fetched, could that be something that transforms change, that has a clear before and after? So it's time to reflect a little bit and see, okay, given these theses about the future, what could that mean to us? What could we do in our business with our company about this? It's time to ask yourself 2 questions. The first rather obvious question would naturally be, what are the pros and cons for us as an existing retailer if we should see, could we maybe level ourselves and extend our business into becoming a provider or a director or maybe even a transformer? And the second question would be, what are the triggers that spur these evolutionary steps? And maybe do we see them in our own line of business as today? Or maybe in something that is really nearby? Now that we have looked through all of these evolutionary steps from the beginning and through the present and looked a little bit into the future, we're also going to take a look at how has the business models and how has the value creation evolved through these evolutionary steps. Well, our first example comes from coffee. When there was a gatherer, somebody picked it up and maybe saw, could we chew it or use it? Somebody saw, this is gaining traction, I'm going to grow coffee, and started growing coffee beans at a little more scale and sell it. Then we came into the modern times, a manufacturing part came and you started to buy coffee in bags or in loose weights. Somebody said, let's start a coffee shop, and started providing coffee, not just beans, but regular coffee on the go. And then somebody said, okay, let's make this into a destination. So this picture is from the director, Starbucks Roast Reserve in Lower Manhattan, was really made a destination out of coffee. And then lastly, our earlier example of bulletproof coffee really proved that a simple product like coffee could have a transformative effect from a business logic perspective. If we add some numbers to this, we can also see the increasing value creation that takes part in this evolution. From the beginning in the gatherer part, well, you just picked up, there was nothing to buy, so it was zero. When you grow it, it wasn't even really a money exchange at all around that. It was more like an exchange with something else. Into the manufacturing part, looking into the values of today, you could say that a cup of coffee, if you brew it yourself, you just buy the beans, it's about 0.05 euros at a cost. If you go into a coffee shop, it's about $2.50 to buy a cup of coffee over a counter. If you go to Starbucks Roast Reserve, it's about $5 for that cup of coffee in that customized, curated part that they serve. And if you go into the Bulletproof and have your coffee with Yogs butter in their specific context, it's about 15. So you could see that the value creation from a consumer perspective is really exponential. Our second example comes from physical health and the evolution in training. In the gathering history, there was no need for doing exercise. You just did what you did to survive. It's almost the same in the grower part. You planted your seeds and you grow the things that you did. You got that exercise you needed. But something happened when we started manufacturing and building factories, and people, general people, didn't move that much as they did when they were farmers. So there was a need to starting to exercise, and you did that on your own. Then somebody said, okay, we're going to need to organize this. I'm going to provide a service. So sports clubs came about, and also gyms. And then somebody realized, people could use some service and put a time slot on that. So they started directing classes to gather people together around a specific gym function or practice. And then somebody realized, we need to do that on an individual level if you really want to transform, you say. So private training came about. So also, if we add some numbers to this, we can see in the gathering and the growing part, there was no equipment, no cost at all for that. But when you started to train yourself, you maybe needed a couple of sneakers or so, so that's about €100. In the providing business, to be a member of a sports club or a gym, well, that's about 500 and above per year. And then the director entered the arena, gathering people with the same interest who really want some guidance in their training, not doing it by themselves, but doing it together with others. And that's about €1,500 a year to be a member in a club like that. And then lastly, people who wanted really to transform, they hired a private trainer to really get a transformation of their own body going. And that's from €5,000 and way above that if you go to somebody who is really, really into this. When we sum this up from a value creation perspective, we can see that things really get off. And you can see that the value for that consuming part really increases. And the big leap is when we go from manufacturing and selling products at a specific spec and turn that into a service. Then it really hits off. Because the value for me as a consuming part increases a lot, because it speaks directly more to me as an individual and person, and it's on my terms. When we shift our focus and logic from what we do till how we do it, that really increases and open up for new kinds of additional services and additional business logics that has a higher value for the consuming part. And specifically, when we move into the transformative part and when we find common ground with our consumers and followers, more to say, on why we do that, could we do that as collabs? It opens up for value creation for all parties that is almost limitless. So it's finally time to sum this all up, to take a look at all these 6 evolutionary steps that came from the past through the present and looking into our hypothesis about the future. Let's take a look. So here's the final grid of all the 6 phases in this evolution. I would recommend you to view it horizontally, starting from the top and reading it from left to right, just to see how the evolution really progresses, and also to be able to identify the triggers that possesses the next step for you. Identifying the evolution of people's needs is the first step for you to maybe reconfigure your business logic and your future offerings if you have the ambition to be of relevance for that evolvement. The second step will be to identify behind that need, what will that concrete request actually be? And is that something that we could cater to? And the natural third step will then be to see how could we distinguish our business logic, our business model, our offering to those clients that we want to serve. In this commerce evolution, we can see that most retailers as of today, and the vast majority of them, is still acting in this field. Acting as agents, having an inventory of more or less standardized product, making them available to more or less anonymous consumers and customers, and the differentiating factor is what do they have on the shelf. But there is also quite a large number of retailers extending their offerings, trying to top the products that they sell today with additional services, moving into a more provider-like circumstances. And we can see that many of the new innovative actors, both online and off, are acting as provider, having a more close relationship with their clients instead of their anonymous customers. And they define themselves more or less by not what they sell, but how they do it. So, it's time to close the show. I hope you find some new insights, some new things to reflect upon, and I really hope you have the ambition to take that back to yourself and to your own organization and your business and see, could we evolve? Could we use some of these insights in progressing our business into the future? But this is all good in theory. Now it's time for you to act. So it's my sincere wish that you take this and act upon it, because theory is worth nothing, it's only action that really counts. I'm going to leave you with a few words down the road. The American philosopher Eric Hoffer so profoundly wrote these lines over a century ago. In times of change, the learners will inherit the world, while the knowers will be beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. So go out in the world and be a proud, action-oriented learner. If you want to get the material on all the slides behind this presentation, please scan the QR code to the left and download all the material. It's free for use for you and also to share with your colleagues. If you want to connect with me via LinkedIn, please scan the QR code to the right and you will get to my page. Or if you want to send me an email or text me or call me, the information is below. Please stay safe. Until next time.